So I'm very happy that we have come up with this program, which is basically empowering general ophthalmologists for COVID compliance. This topic was actually given by Dr. Ajay Dudani, and I'm thankful for that. And basically, we are going to share this program as a training program for general ophthalmologists, by which we will be deciding how to train them so that they can actually identify and uh, do the referral basically for ophthalmology for diabetic retinopathy. So that's why I have used the word human in allowed to AI. Dr. Ajay Kudani is a professor, director of Mumbai Retina Center. He is our senior panelist today. He will be talking about when to indulge and how much. He has 60 publications and more than 200 presentations. Very active ER surgeon for a couple of decades. Dr. Mohit is a consultant of Regency Hospital Limited. Active, he has been involved in active retina treatment for a decade. Many publications and presentations to his credit, and he has gifted a logo to this program. So that's the beauty. Somebody has given something to this program, and it's a composite effort. Dr. Manish is an active VR surgeon here in Kanpur who believes in taking anything and everything in retina, and he has been involved now for almost a decade and more. Dr. Abhishek Dikshit did, after doing his VR fellowship from Thinker Netralaya, has practiced as a consultant in Sitapurai Hospital. Is currently practicing in Varanasi and has a career of active VR surgery for more than a decade. And Dr. Abhijat is a young budding ophthalmologist who is senior residency at Subharti Hospital, has two international presentations, one Best Paper Award, and is having experience of being panel for uh, two ICF AIOC. This program has been mastered and patronized by Dr. Lalit Verma, who needs actually no introduction. He's in AI, our president of AIOC. So that is the panel with which we are entering into our second consecutive session of uh, VR for general ophthalmologists, which is a human analog. So a brief introduction about how artificial intelligence works. Artificial intelligence is basically, uh, this was first uh, told by Dr. Haldipurkar, that basically a computer is recognizing a picture, it is dividing those pictures into mathematical breakups, and then it goes through certain filters, and those mathematical filters, they get converted into a picture. So that's how a computer is recognizing a picture into a picture. These are certain filters which are used when a computer is deciphering this photograph into a plot. So there are certain filters by which AI is working. Now, this is a OMR sheet we all have seen during our PG examination, and it works on the basis of that picture recognition. If we want to give some more color to this picture, we will add fingerprints, and we'll add some other features so that this becomes more meaningful. Another example of picture recognition is, say, this computer with AI can recognize this as a dog, as a normal retina, or a diseased retina. As of now, AI in diabetic retinopathy remains a screening tool, and purpose is to identify treatable diabetic retinopathy patients. Now, this was in April 2018. FDA approved this machine, which is basically a software, IDXDR software, which comes on a Topcon computer camera. And what it does, it just deciphers between more than mild diabetic retinopathy and less than mild diabetic retinopathy. It compares a picture of ETDRS chart, which is a level 35 chart, and on the basis of that, it decides whether to refer a patient or to keep it under observation. If it is to keep it under observation, then it will be telling the patient to come after 12 months. It has a sensitivity and a specificity of 90%. Now, on a similar basis, we have introduced the concept of human analog. So our aim should be simplified. Our criteria, identification criteria should be simple. The tools with which we will be handling should be easy to handle. Our target should be simple and achievable. And that's how we do a predictable outcome. So basically, vis-a-vis as computer is doing to the program of diabetic screening, we can develop a human analog. So we did our first program. Vis-a-vis AI was introduced into diabetic retinopathy in 2018. We did in summers of 2018 this program of CME with difference. Dr. Avijat will be telling more about it. The thing is, when we teach our students, we teach so many things, so many classifications, so many features that it becomes very confusing. But when we give to the computer, we give it in a very simplified form. So the thing is, if we can simplify, so diabetic retinopathy classification is getting simplified, and if we can give that simplified information to ophthalmologists, they will be in a very nice position to understand the disease and identify and treat. So this is a population survey data which shows that this is your population, this is your prevalence of 20% with 8.7% diabetes and 24% on an average progressing to diabetic retinopathy. So this is our burden of diabetics and retinopathy patients. This is the burden of proliferative PDR cases. And if we think our AIOS members to be 22,000, the PDR load per member is actually not much. So a burden is manageable, and if each ophthalmologist get the capacity of identifying treatable diabetic retinopathy, the job becomes very simple. We presented the similar thing in our other conferences at Uttarakhand. Luckily, when I was working on my project, I came out with this document, which is a WHO guideline, screening guideline of 2020 based on European studies. And what they are doing, you see, they are doing exactly the same what we have been doing. They have identified these 5 photographs for identification, and for macular edema, either there is no macular edema or macular edema not involving the center or macular edema involving the center. So what they have done is they have simplified the criteria, which are very similar to the criteria which we have used. So they have developed a referral threshold based on whether patient needs reference or not. So if it is screen positive, we will refer. If it is screen negative, we'll keep it under surveillance. Earlier, the review was the patient should come after 1 year. Now they have relaxed it to 2 years. And what they are doing, who can do? Doctors, family doctors, optometrists, ophthalmologists, endocrinologists. So they are actually talking on the similar terms as we are talking, and that is the relevance of our program. And what has it yielded? Their visual loss, the burden because of visual loss in 2 studies have gone down over a period of decade by using this model. So that is the use in our perspective. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the thing which we have introduced. We are working on it for 2018, and I'm really thankful to AIOS and our Chairman Scientific Committee, Dr. Partha Biswas, for allowing us to share this program, and I think it will be useful. So we will be talking, that was the concept introduction, that Avijat will be talking about previous experience. Then we will have takeaways on clinical thing by Dr. Mohit and by Dr. Manish, and investigating by Dr. Mohit. And there will be a very nice talk by Dr. Ajay Dudani on takeaways on diabetic retinopathy, how much to indulge and when. And then Dr. Abhishek will be talking about surgical indications from the point of view of diabetic from general ophthalmology. So that's it. I think I'm in time and I invite Dr. Abhijat Chaturvedi to come forward and make his presentation of our previous experiences with these. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me start my share screen. Okay, is it visible now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You can do it full screen.
Yeah, so good afternoon everyone. Today I'm going to discuss about the previous experiences and outcomes of the concept of diabetic retinopathy for a general ophthalmologist. So why the concept was brought in? It was basically brought in for three purposes. The firstly was to empower general ophthalmologists to successfully screen and diagnose the patient, to decide whether to observe or to manage the disease process. And a special focus on the third point, which was to achieve success in the above goals in low or intermediate resource setting, as in the setting of our nation, where a general ophthalmologist has to cater a majority of rural population, especially in the camp area, where the availability of advanced machinery is not there, so artificial intelligence would not work, and an ophthalmologist, he or she must definitely depend on his clinical acumen alone. So now we'll have a look on the chronological evolution of DR4Geo, the human animal. It all began in 2018 at Kanpur, where a CME with difference was conducted by the same team, where one of the pioneers...
Dr. Abhijat, can you come a bit closer to your this thing so that we become more audible?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, better, much better. Come closer.
Okay. So here, one of the pioneers of ophthalmology, Dr. Lalit Verma, he also gave his important insights to the initiation of this concept. So in the year 2019, another presentation was conducted at UK SOS regarding the same concept. And in the same year, another exercise was conducted at GSPM Medical College, Kanpur, where the residents were explained and eventually the possibility, if it could be applied in the field, started to become a reality. So in the year 2020, we thought of bringing it at a mass level, and for the first time, the concept of DR4Geo was presented at an instruction course at AIUS Gurgaon last year. So now in the year 2021, in the month of May, we conducted an online survey via the Google form where random ophthalmologists were asked questions and their answers were recorded. And right now at Virtual AIUS, we are presenting the same concept but with an evolved insight to it. So this was the voting pad which was given to all the participants last year in the instruction course, where they had 3 buttons and they could give an answer by pressing 1, 2 or 3, which corresponded to yes, no or can't say. So this was an example which was given, and according to that, their responses were recorded. So what was the basis of the course? We chose to inform the participants about the vision-threatening diabetic retinopathy features and to ease the screening and identification of the disease process by the general ophthalmologist. We chose that we should, rather than looking at the clinically significant macular edema, we should go for diabetic macular edema, which is involving center or not. This makes the process of screening and identification very easy. So in the previous instruction course, the training was done in 2 steps. In the first step, we showed simplified photographs of the retinopathy to everyone, and they were given a response time of 30 seconds, after which voting was conducted. And the responses of all the ophthalmologists were recorded and they were shown. So the selection of the participants was done randomly. This was done to mandate participation. So now I'm going to show you some slides which were shown before the participants were taught about any feature. And we asked them a simple question that is this vision threatening diabetic retinopathy and they had to answer in three like yes, no, or cannot be commented upon. The actual answers were not shown at this time. They were only shown after their responses were recorded. So we can see that this was the response recorded here. In the next slide, again, we could observe a similar kind of response. And like that also, we can see here that again, a similar response corresponding to previous slides was observed. So this was a slide which was kept specially, where again we have the same question that is it VTDR, and majority of the population said yes. However, we can see that this is not a VTDR. Definitely it is vision threatening, but this is not diabetic retinopathy. So this was kept because we need to have an idea of some awareness of the fact that general ophthalmologists should know that it is not only vision threatening, but this slide should also be diabetic retinopathy. So similarly, we kept few more slides, and since this is a clear-cut case, majority population could get it right. Again, we could see an erratic response like the previous slide. And since this is also a clear-cut case, the majority population gets it correctly. So to interpret, the responses were quite erratic in nature, and a state of uncertainty and doubt was observed. So now comes the second step, where the basic criteria by the International Council of Ophthalmology for diabetic retinopathy was introduced. And again, the pictures of some disease patterns were shown, like the macular edema, vitreous hemorrhage, neovascularization of disc and ulcer, etc. Now the VTDR characteristics were taught to the participants, and again the process of showing a photograph and on-the-spot voting was conducted, and the results were recorded. So this time we again showed them pictures, and the response was seen, but somehow this was similar to the response previous. But then the people, after knowing the features, they started to apply it, and now we can see there is a change in the responses of the participants. This was a slide that was kept previous to the presentation also, and now we can see there's a marked difference in the result, though their answer guess was not correct, but yes, definitely they tried to apply the concept. So again, we can see that in this slide, a special note that the answer here is in a divided form. The participants are not clear about the response here. Since this is a clear-cut case, again everyone gets the correct answer. So like in the slide previous to the one I presented just before, here again the answers are divided among the participants. And as we can see, since this is very clear-cut case, so everyone, almost everyone gets it correct. Here again we can see a divided answer, but this time it is between no or cannot be commented. And again, a very clear-cut case of VTDR where everyone gets the correct response. So the results of after this presentation, we can see that very clearly, majority population gets the answer correctly. And this was 60% of the slides where people could guess very correctly. And there were 20% slides marked in red where the answer was not correct. However, the majority population said that yes, it is VTDR, but in actuality it was not. And there was only 20% slides where people had a divided answer. So these are the statistics which correlate with the artificial intelligence. Thus, we can say that when artificial intelligence can do it, why not a general ophthalmologist can do it? So to interpret on random selection and voting, predictable outcome was recorded and mandate was quite clear in the clear cases. And after this, we need to upgrade the decision-making capacity of all the ophthalmologists. And however, it was doubtful in the borderline cases where we need to work more on how to expand the thinking of ophthalmologists so that they can get the correct answers in borderline cases also. So as I talked before, we conducted an online survey via the Google form where responses of 23 ophthalmologists was recorded. So, but this time we asked that would they like to treat the patient or not? So again, we can see that in slide 1 and 2, the responses are again divided among the population. They are not sure whether we are to do this or not. However, in clear-cut cases, we can again see that majority population wants to treat the patient, which is the correct thing. And this is again a slide which we kept repeatedly, and again we can see that people are not sure whether to treat this or not. So in clear-cut cases, the answers are accurate, and hence we just need to educate the ophthalmologist for further management. However, we need to work a lot in borderline cases as the answers were divided and people are still doubtful, and definitely we need to work on it so that people could give answers more appropriately and proceed for further management. Thank you everyone for your patience.
Great, Dr. Abhijat. What I understand is from your presentation, what I understand is that if we present general ophthalmologists with clear-cut cases, their pick rate is very high. Is that all right?
Yes.
And in doubtful cases, they remain quite uncertain. What do you take about it?
In clear-cut cases, people are able to identify it very easily. But the cases where it is not clear, so not only a human being, even the computers are not able to identify that do we treat this or do we not treat this. So we could add on few steps, few identifying features by which we can, since we know everyone here knows how the disease progresses, so we can very easily know that if this will progress to be a worsening thing or not, and then we can identify that is it vision threatening or is it not, or will it be in future or not, and then we can decide on the management of the thing.
Great. I think your survey has been very useful to us, and a lot of feedback has come from Dr. Manish also. And as I have mentioned, that this program is actually a composite effort by a team, and we are actually evolving a concept which is quite new to our system. I think your presentation has been very useful. You have shared almost everything which we had over a period of last 3 years. And luckily, I think all the studies which were done over a period, we went to PG students and they came out with similar results. We went to general ophthalmologists of various age and they came out with very good positive results. So it shows that there is a very good possibility. If we teach them clear guidelines, clear simplified guidelines, they should be able to identify treatable diabetic retinopathy with a reasonable predictability, sensitivity, and specificity. Thank you very much, Dr. Abhijat. Now, Dr. Manish Saxena, as I have mentioned, he's an active VR surgeon in Kanpur, and he has an experience of almost a decade of active VR surgery. And I would like him to present his slides. So basically what we want that he would give us general takeaways, which are clinical takeaways for our general ophthalmology friends. Over to you, Dr. Manish. Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Great. Go ahead.
So my slides visible, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Malay sir, and thank you, Abhijat. It was really a nice and a summarization of all the work what we have done so far in last 3 years. So I'll just summarize the things. Basically, it's repetitions of learning. What we want to teach all the general ophthalmologists how to identify the clinical signs of diabetic retinopathy. So my this presentation is all about learning clinical signs to diagnose vision-threatening diabetic retinopathy. So I still remember when Malay sir actually introduced this concept, and this picture actually tells us about the concept of the principle of this IC is this project. What exactly we are doing with this IC. So this is it was like in May 2018 he said one AI is coming and that will screen the diabetic retinopathy. So just to simplify screen a diabetic retinopathy, why we need a machine costing 6 lakhs, 7 lakhs? And that was the time when the struggle, that fight between the humans and AI started. And so this picture depicts everything according to. So let us see where the problems are. So most of us in diabetic retinopathy, we follow the ETDRS classification. This ETDRS classification is the proliferative and non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So there are so many like mild, moderate, severe, very severe, early PDR, high risk PDR. So there are so much to learn, so much to diagnose for these cases. But if you just see from treatment point of view, mild, moderate, severe generally just need a observation. They don't need to get a screen. They don't need to not screen. They just don't need any treatment. So they can be kept on regular observation. But the other segment, which is very severe, we have very severe NPDR, early PDR, and high risk PDR. These are the cases along with the macular edema. These are the cases which are actually important. So we came to the concept, we followed the concept of vision threatening. So the earlier segment is a non-vision threatening diabetic retinopathy. The other important part is a vision threatening diabetic retinopathy. So what we have to learn is a vision threatening, and we just delete the non-vision threatening part, how the AI is working. Okay. So this presentation is all about learning this vision threatening diabetic retinopathy. So diabetic retinopathy, it's a so before we move, we should learn what is exactly the normal fundus. So normal fundus contain optic disc, central in having the macula and the vessels. So this is the normal disc, but I'm not talking about the mild, moderate, severe, or any other symptoms. I'm just focusing on the vision-threatening diabetic retinopathy and coming directly to the very severe NPDR. So how we define very severe NPDR? If we are seeing intraretinal hemorrhages in all the 4 quadrants, or we are seeing venous bleeding in 2 quadrants, or IRMAs in any 1 quadrant. What are these 3 structures? So hemorrhages, actually, if we see in diabetic retinopathy, there are multiple types of hemorrhage, and that gives confusion. There are multiple slides which patients were not able to answer because they were hemorrhage, but they were not sure whether to treat or not. So I will just simplify this hemorrhage part. We have to focus on the intraretinal hemorrhages. These intraretinal hemorrhages are occurring in the deeper layer of the retina. Yeah. So what happening? These are tightly spaced retinal layer. These hemorrhages can occur due to rupture of the microorganism, dot and blot hemorrhage. So they are like coin shape or irregularly round shaped hemorrhages, which can be seen in this picture. Apart from this, we see a superficial hemorrhage in lots of diabetic patients. These superficial hemorrhages are occurring in the nerve fiber layer, and these hemorrhages tends to get settled along the nerve fiber layer. So that is where the shape comes, which is kind of a flame shaped or splinter shaped superficial hemorrhage. So in very severe NPDR, intraretinal hemorrhages are more important as compared to superficial hemorrhage. So that we need to focus on first. Second feature of very severe NPDR is the venous bleeding in any of the 2 quadrants. So this venous bleeding can be easily make out on clinical finding. Third important structures are the IRMAs in 1 quadrant. So what are these? What is this IRMA? IRMA is intraretinal microvascular abnormalities. So basically, these are the neovascularization which is occurring inside the layers of the retina, not over the surface. When it occurs over the surface, then we call NVD or NVE, and which tend to which are very fragile and gives hemorrhages. These IRMAs, they are not that much fragile and occurring in the deeper layer of the retina. But these are important because these indicate that patients are very soon it's going to convert into proliferative diabetic retinopathy and needs to treat as early as possible. So to say patient is a case of very severe NPDR, we should have at least 2 of this, either IRMA in 1 quadrant, venous bleeding in 2 quadrant, or intraretinal hemorrhage in all 4 quadrants. If any 2 of these are present, then patient is having very severe NPDR. So once this phase is over, the proliferative phase comes. Proliferative phase when we start seeing neovascularizations over the surface of the retina. So neovascularizations are easy to diagnose when there are we have to classify, we have to differentiate whether it's NVD or NVE, but it doesn't matter whether it's NVD or NVE. Both needs treatment. So any neovascularizations over the disc or over the 1/3 of area of the disc is called NVD, and beyond that it is called NVE. So these are the tuft of vessels arising from the over the surface of the retina. So again, these are the neovascularizations we can see. Now come to when these neovascularizations or the NVE or NVD ruptures, what happens? If suppose this bleeding is happening in a subhyaloid space, which is a space between the posterior hyaloid and a retina. So most of the time, these kind of hemorrhages give a shape of subhyaloid space, which is a boat shape. So these are called pre-retinal hemorrhage. So mostly it's a boat shape, but it can be irregular, like seeing in this picture. So this is simply explain that patients are having neovascularization, which are getting ruptured, and patients are having this pre-retinal hemorrhage and need immediate treatment. Similarly, when this hemorrhage tickles into the vitreous cavity, then this vitreous hemorrhage, this is called vitreous hemorrhage, which when this vitreous hemorrhage comes, we may not be able to see the retina, and it's easily to diagnose. There is nothing we have to learn. So once patients are having neovascularization of the over the surface of the retina, later on this neovascularization keeps becoming fibrous. More and more fibrous tissue keeps coming, and when it becomes more fibrous, then they try to pull the retina, and then only the patient starts developing these retinal detachment. So if there is just a pulling, there are no break, then it is called tractional or TRD. Or when due to more traction there are any break at the base of the that detachment, then it is called combined retinal detachment. So far we have learned very severe NPDR. Very severe NPDR is simply we have to focus on the intraretinal hemorrhage, not on the superficial hemorrhage. Second, venous bleeding in 2 quadrant. And third, IRMAs in 1 quadrant. IRMAs are easily diagnosed structures. And after that, proliferative, I guess proliferative diabetic retinopathy are easy to diagnose. If we have learned these two, the other simple thing which we need to focus is the macular edema. So again, ETDRS classification has given so many definitions of defining macular edema and saying that it is clinically significant. So here to simplify that clinically significant macular edema, we just say you decide whether macular is involving center or near center, or it's not involving center. So whenever the macular edema is involving center, that is the vision threatening. And if it is not, it's non-center macular edema, it's not significant macular edema. So take-home message is very simple. We have to focus on these very severe PDR and macular edema. And the important take-home message is AI can screen these patients, but the human touch, the attachment to the patients and the care we can give to the patient cannot be done by AI. So that is why we need to be very much vigilant. These simple steps can learn us. We will not be dependent on AI to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. That's what we all want. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. It was a fantastic presentation. And you have simplified it in such a way that it was really very easy to understand. So basically what you were mentioning, that we should take our point of reference as VTDR, means four quadrants of superficial hemorrhage, bleeding in 2 quadrants, that's IRMA in 1 quadrant, NVE, PDR and the PDR features, and macular edema involving center or not involving center. So we have been, as we have already mentioned, that we have been working on this project right from 2018, and I have shown you such a nice photograph of CME with the difference in Kanpur, which we did when Dr. Lalit Verma came, and he asked us, Dr. Malay, what is the difference? And I said, here we are actually targeting to empower the general ophthalmologist, and he was very happy. He is running a simultaneous session elsewhere in another hall, but he has actually said that I'll come and join in. He has joined it. Lalit Verma sir, are you listening to us?
Yeah.
Please.
Hi, sir.
For having me here, and I'm so thrilled to be participating also for small time. I remember, a couple of years back. I don't know the year, but I was in Kanpur and listened to you and your entire team. I remember Mohit, Abhishek, Manish lecturing there, and I liked the session so much that instead of anybody else asking me, I approached Malay after the session over, food. Then I requested Malay and all the speakers that why don't you help me at that time as a chairman of scientific committee. So why don't you help me do the same session without any change in AIUS? So he said he would love to do it. And believe me, since that time, he has done this session for a couple of years. And I'm so happy. The reason why I requested is because the topic was DR for the Go means general ophthalmologist. And in diabetic retinopathy, whatever you do, whatever retinologists may keep doing, whatever, cameras, injections, but if it is confined to retinologists, believe me, it's not going to make dent at all. In AIUS, a lot of presidents have started DR control program, right? I can name also Kuresh Maskati, NSD Raju. Everybody is into diabetic retinopathy, but no dent actually. At a national level, no dent has been made. So I was not very happy that, you see, because the knowledge is confined primarily to retinologists. Dudani is listening here, Professor Dudani, I can see here. So I requested Malay to please come to AIUS. So he was gracious enough. He did this session, DR for the Go, because in AIUS, majority of the ophthalmologists out of 26,000 we have, they are Go, general ophthalmologists. If you don't take help of general ophthalmologists in screening of diabetic retinopathy or in educating those people or making aware, like Manish just now was talking about, which are the patients which are to be referred, and you see how do you classify this patient. So best would be, Malay, to prepare one chart where you have photographs of all the stages, what Manish has very nicely shown, photographs. So for a common ophthalmologist, what I would suggest is those who have fundus camera, एक picture लिया, उसमें देखा, ये very severe है, so refer it to this thing. So at least this much contribution Go can do, and this is the onus of this, Malay and his team, that you have to penetrate to general ophthalmologists. And how do you penetrate apart from doing sessions here and there is to have one chart prepared which should be hung on the clinics of every general ophthalmologist so that they can see and compare. Even if they do ophthalmoscopy, they will know, and then they can refer. So I'm very happy for the entire team who's working primarily for general ophthalmologists. आम आदमी के लिए काम कर रहे हैं. And this is what is required because diabetic retinopathy concerns all of us, everybody. In fact, the prevalence of diabetic retinopathy has increased now thanks to Pizza Hut and burgers and all these things. Obesity has increased. Type 2 diabetic retinopathy has increased so much, and hence the job of us, that is to make people aware. Then only people will refer us. Then only Dudani will give injections, and then only we will try to decrease the blindness, because that is the concern. Malay told, we want to prevent unnecessary blindness in diabetic retinopathy. So thank you, Malay, for conceiving this program, and please don't lose the momentum. Please carry on till you achieve something of it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lalit. Thanks. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, I think Dr. Ajay, would you like to say something to Lalit sir?
No, I would like to say, really, I think he's brought out the point because he's the incoming president now. And I think we need to take this on a war footing, And even in a city like Mumbai, I have seen that, many of our general ophthalmologists even have an OCT, but they are missing these cases, like everybody is giving injections in a city like Mumbai. But I think if we can educate them which one to inject, which one not to inject with a fundus photograph and also an OCT, which we have nowadays, I think it'll go a long way in eradicating this blindness.
Yeah, I think his suggestion, Dr. Lalit sir's suggestion is fantastic. That our Geo team, which is headed by you now, I think you are senior most of the VR guy here. We can make a chart sort of thing and post it to General Ophthalmology. That's a fantastic idea. In fact, we are guided by Lalit sir like this right from the inception in 2018. Lalit sir, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks, Lalit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And sir, now we are ready with our next presentation. Dr. Mo, sir, it is the same team which we have been working from.
I saw that. I saw the names.
Yes, yes, yes. So Dr. Mohit is now going to present investigative takeaways for general ophthalmology. Dr. Mohit, are you ready?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Good
please.
afternoon, sir. And good afternoon, one and all. And thank you, Dr. Malay, sir, and AIOC for including me in this program and giving this opportunity to share my inputs in this prestigious program of DR for Go. Let me share my screen first. Now is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible. Very
Okay,
nice.
that is great. So my presentation is just an extension of what my friend Manish elucidated in his presentation. We now are in a state when we know the picture, the clinical picture of diabetic retinopathy. So what are we going to take in FFA and OCT as investigative modality? This is my job to tell you, and I shall be showing just spot on cardinal pictures that what purposefully you have to see to call it a diseased retina on an angiogram or an OCT in terms of diabetic retinopathy. So, what is the basic purpose of FFA here in diabetic retinopathy? First is to detect neovascularization, to categorize with a stamp that it is a PDR or a proliferative diabetic retinopathy or not. Second is then to see the general features like microaneurysms, hemorrhages, irmas, neovascular fronts. Then to see whether macula is ischemic or not, or we have any capillary non-perfusion areas. So you have to see ischemic areas, you have to see proliferative areas, and you have to see the cardinal structural abnormalities. Then you have to see the type of leak in case edema is there, like focal or diffuse leak. And now I come to the photographs. When we talk of microaneurysm, see this clinical picture. Like Manish showed, it contains hard exudates, it contains microaneurysms like these red structures. These are microaneurysms, and when angiogram is done in early phases, you see these white points. These all white points are microaneurysms leaking out there. And then in late phases, you see discrete leaking areas. These are the discrete leakages from the microaneurysms. Now, how do we differentiate between a microaneurysm and a hemorrhage? A hemorrhage like this is an intraretinal hemorrhage or a deep hemorrhage, which Manish told. This will never leak. This is going to be blocked throughout the angiogram, while the microaneurysms, which were like this pinpoint white dots, they will keep leaking and will show white leakage out there. So this is how you differentiate between a microaneurysm and a deep hemorrhage. Then see this. This is a diffuse leak. This is not a discrete leak as you saw earlier. So microaneurysms can give you a discrete leakage, or many microaneurysms can coalesce in an area and give a diffuse kind of leak in a macular edema case. So these are the two kinds of leakages which are seen. Then you see what is NVD. This is classical picture that Manish was also showing, that there is a proliferation over the disc. So this is an NVD, and when we do an angiogram, you see a profuse leak on the head of the optic nerve. So this is a leaking NVD. This is exactly the cardinal picture you have to see, and adjoining it you can see this area. This is whenever it is a smooth dark gray area, this is non-perfused or ischemic area. So this is ischemic area, while this is an actively leaking area. So this is NVD, and when in late phases it goes, this exactly covers the whole of the picture and is leaking profusely. So this is classically NVD. Now you see NVE. One more important thing in this picture, there is this asteroid hyalosis also, that is haze in the vitreous. But when you do an angiogram, this goes off. You don't see this haze here in angiogram, and this is the neovascular front, the NVE. This is proliferative. This is NVE, neovascularization elsewhere, and this is neovascular front which is seen, and beyond it is a capillary non-perfusion area. So this is classical picture of an NVE in an early phase of angiogram, and in late phases it keeps on leaking and leaking. The white part increases and the black part here is stagnant, showing the capillary non-perfusion. So this is a classical picture of a neovascular front giving a leak with a capillary non-perfusion beyond it. Now, whenever there is long-standing non-perfusion, there are collaterals formed from one place to other. They don't leak. They are just hyperfluorescent, and you can see the dye flowing through these blood vessels. These are immature vessels from one large vessel to the other. These are called collaterals. And then what we will see venous looping. Manish also showed a very good picture. This is picture showing venous loop, and then in an angiogram how it looks, these are the collaterals, they are not leaking. NVE is leaking, and this is a beading. Manish also showed the red one, the colored picture. Here is the angiogram of a beaded vein. So beading I have shown, looping I have shown, and collaterals are here, and this is a neovascular area. So till now, I hope everybody is with me. We saw microaneurysms, hemorrhages, and then we saw diffuse and discrete leak, neovascularization of disc, neovascular front, capillary non-perfusion, venous looping, beading, and leakages with collaterals. Now, how these laser marks look like? These are hypofluorescent or black areas with a border of white areas. They stain, and these are the laser marks. And the progressive whiteness, whenever there is progressive whiteness, that shows leakage. But when there is stagnant whiteness, that shows a staining kind of thing. So these are the laser marks, and these white areas are the leaking areas. Macular ischemia, you see the foveal avascular zone, the dot central foveal area. If it is not perfectly round, it is irregular in shape and is darker, blackish, rather than the normal gray fluorescence. This is dark black. So this shows that there is macular ischemia. Now, why montage is made? Because retina is not just the central 50-degree, and diabetic retinopathy can often affect only the peripheral areas. Dr. Malay is pioneer in making montages. He makes beautiful montages. I must compliment you, sir, here. So montages are helpful to see the peripheral retina. So the pictures taken from periphery are fused through the software in the fundus camera to give a montage picture, and many times a surprise or a disease which is not seen in the central view can be detected by this technique. So we can have problems in the periphery which can be detected through montage images like this. So if you have the facility of montage, do make it. You have to see the surprises if there are any. That makes you an excellent one above the good level. So often there are surprises. This picture looks fine enough with something around here, but when you put it into an angiogram, see, they start leaking from the early phases, and it increases and increases, and you see there is a cystoid kind of appearance on the macula. So if you don't have an OCT just on the color picture, if you are seeing a patient of diabetes and you suspect some retinopathy, then it is good to have an angiogram done if your clinical picture does not match with the final vision status of the patient. So if the vision is not explained by the picture, then an angiogram can often help you to detect surprises also. Now, patients can be followed up on FFA also. See this picture, patient had some leak here, some capillary non-perfusion here, and also budding leaks over here in macula. The laser was reinforced, laser was increased here, and then an angiogram was done to see the follow-up. Now the leak has decreased out here on the macula itself, and this CNP area has been covered by the laser. So patients can be followed up on FFA also in order to see whether there is residual leakage or not, so as to predict whether the patient is going to land up on a vitreous hemorrhage or not. So FFA helps to identify lesions, to detect whether it is proliferative or not, and also helps to see whether we are going to have impending problems or not. So that is predictive also. Now shifting on to OCT, the optical coherence tomograph. Beautiful tool for diabetic retinopathy, and I would say if you want to have one tool for diabetic retinopathy, then I would recommend an OCT. This is indispensable if you want to treat a patient of diabetic retinopathy. To understand it, freeze this picture in your mind. This is the normal macular contour with a foveal dip. The colors you have to see, these are the layers, not going much into anatomy, but I must tell you diabetic retinopathy affects here in the middle of the retina, and you have to see the vitreous and retina interface, what we called as vitreoretinal interface. Above here is vitreous, here is choroid, and all 10 layers of retina lie here in between. We have to be particular about the vitreoretinal interface and the mid of retina, especially in the plexiform and the nuclear layers. These are the layers most affected by the diabetic retinopathy. So what we have to see that in OCT, this kind of picture comes. We have freeze this picture, I must tell you. This kind of picture, whenever you see on an OCT, this is color code. Hotter the color means retina is thicker. If you are getting colors like pink, orange, red, white, that means the retinal thickness is increasing. But if you are getting the colors which are cool like blue, green, they means it is thinner. Blue is thin, green is normal, and yellow, orange, pink and red are higher colors or the hotter colors. White is very high. So first of all, for a basic understanding of an OCT, you see this thing. Okay, what is the color coding? If you are getting more of the red colors, that means you are going to get more retinal thickness out there, and then you can compare with the retinal picture that whether this is edematous or not. This retina is edematous. You can see that these are cystoid cavities with a epiretinal membrane out here, and this is normal. This was after an injection given to the patient. See the complete picture, the color picture, the red free picture enhancing the hemorrhages and all, the fluorescein angiogram showing the diffuse leak, and then you find that the retina is edematous. This is the morphology of the retina, giving the intraretinal cystoid spaces, the subretinal
Dr. Mohit, we can't hear.
Yeah, I think he has been muted by the timer, I think.
So let him speak. Who's the person in the charge of the hall? We have enough time.
No,
Yes.
sir, no, we have not muted him.
Are you sure?
So,
Yes, yes, we have not muted him.
yeah, that is what I'm saying, that actually you have kept it 10 minutes. You enhance the time, we have enough time.
We have enough time, not an issue with that. And we have not,
I think it is a internet
I think
connection.
some network problem from his side, I think.
Yes.
Okay, doesn't matter. I think what we'll do, let Dr. Mohit come back. He has shown some fantastic pictures of angiogram and some fantastic pictures of OCT. He was actually doing it in a very professional way, with very interesting takeaways clinically as given by Manish and investigatively as given by Dr. Mohit. So I think,
Am I audible?
yeah, I think Dr. Mohit, you can go ahead. There's a lot of time. Don't worry about this timer.
Okay. Something happened with the internet. I shall continue.
Yeah, please carry on. If you can continue, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just finish it up in 2 minutes.
No, there's no hurry.
So-
Take your time. Take your time.
Okay,
You're
so
doing very nice, fabulous. Go ahead.
is my screen coming?
Yeah, vitreomacular
Yes,
interface.
yes.
That I can read.
Yes. So that's great. So I hope I was connected till here. Cystoid and spongy edema.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I shift to vitreomacular interface. So whenever we talk of vitreomacular interface, this is the line we see above the OCT retinal scan, that this is the vitreous posterior haloid. So in case this is discontinued here from the retina, this is the PVD. Posterior vitreous detachment. This is PVD, and this is the small traction that is developing here in the retina, So small changes are recorded like this when they affect the vitreomacular interface. And then second thing that can be there, that is a diffuse or concrete line over the whole of the macula. This is the thick ERM that has formed over the retinal surface along with the cystoid macular edema. Sometimes this ERM is associated with fibrotic changes. A PDR patient can present like this with fibrotic changes on the inner retinal surface with this kind of line. This is showing ERM with fibrotic changes. And then when it goes to an advanced stage, then the whole retina is pulled up along with cystoid spaces so as to have a vitreomacular traction along with cystoid spaces. So these are the main kind of vitreomacular interface abnormalities seen on an OCT. Now, there can be epiretinal membrane causing a pseudo hole or maybe a true hole also when it pulls up the retina like this. So OCT beautifully detects not only edema but also detects the vitreomacular interface abnormalities and also helps to document the lesion in order for the patient and the attendants to understand what exactly is happening in the morphology of retina. Again, these are advanced cases of vitreomacular interface abnormalities. Now, often OCT is correlated with B scan. This B scan, here there is lens, here this is optic nerve head shadow. So this is the vitreous. Here nothing you will get because this is a normal scan. But then whenever there is this kind of thing that there is a thick membrane pulling the retina, this can be detected subtly here on a B scan. So when you order a B scan, in case there is a hemorrhage and you don't get the fundus photograph, even on a B scan you can pick some points that can be correlated with a good OCT. And whenever there is a huge traction, the retina is pulled up like anything because of the membrane, then you can correlate this on a B scan that similar thing is happening here as well as here. For an NVD like this, a membrane, a tuft of blood vessels growing in a flat surface over the retina. This is the angiogram showing the leak, and this is a wide angle OCT done. This is a membrane over the optic nerve head which extends up to the macula and gives a taut appearance on the inner retinal surface. PDR with macular bleed. This similar picture was shown beautifully by Dr. Manish, and this is an intraretinal bleed which is documented in OCT like this. You cannot make out the retinal layers now inside the retina. This is because of the backscattering of light here, the bleed. The light is not permitted to percolate through the blood, so there is no structure visible out here. And then whenever there is vitreous bleed, see there is vitreous hemorrhage, a PDR case on a B scan, you see there is blood out here. These echogenicities lie in front of the retinal surface, and then when you correlate with an OCT, you find the diseased retina showing intraretinal cystoid spaces with subretinal fluid and a preretinal shadowing pre-retinal reflectivities out here. In OCT we called it reflectivity, while in B scan we called it echogenicity. So now this is the PVD out here, and this is the blood. This is pre-retinal bleed here in OCT, and then in an advanced vitreous hemorrhage, see this is a PDR case with an NVD which is leaking and seen very much in FFA, and there you see retina is lying here and the membrane has pulled up and just come out here, and lot of blood is aggregated in the pre-retinal space and in vitreous. So all investigations, be it OCT, be it B scan, be it FFA or just the fundal picture, give the same information, just an extension on one over the other, and can be correlated beautifully if some wisdom is used. So I thank you all for patient hearing and careful attention. Believe me, these pictures, when you freeze them in your mind, and as innovatively said by Dr. Lalit Verma and patronized by Dr. Malay, if you make up a chart and then everybody mugs up these pictures and just compares the finding with these, I think all diagnosis can be made and then an adequate referral can be arranged. Thank you all.
Mohit, you have been very comprehensive. You showed some very nice pictures, and I'm really impressed by the collection you have of your patients. These photographs are really,
Thank you.
I have enjoyed. I'm also recording your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank
Once
you.
we have identified that our point of intersection for referral is VTDR, that is vision threatening diabetic retinopathy. And once we know that these are the clinical features, 4:2:1 rule, which is responsible for vision VTDR features. Dr. Mohit has shown us some clinical picture. How does it look like in angiography? How does OCT picture looks like? What are the red code and what is the blue color? It really looks Greek and Latin to a blue person. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the time for Dr. Ajay Dudhani. He is an active surgeon, very educated ophthalmologist. When I talked to him about my program, he said, why don't you give this a small phrase, empowering for COVID compliance. So the COVID compliance is Ajay Dudhani's brainchild contribution to this program. He will be talking about when to indulge and how much. Over to you, Dr. Ajay.
Yeah, thanks, Malay, for your kind invite. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of this esteemed audience and faculty. So I'll be basically talking that, as we are very well aware that the problem of diabetes, 1 in 11 adults are suffering with diabetes worldwide. And almost 80% of these people are in the low and middle class income countries, like the developing countries. And more than 93 million people are having some eye damage. And 1 out of 3 living people with diabetes will have diabetic retinopathy. And impact of vision loss on poor is very extreme because it affects the earning capacity and there's loss of dependence and dignity which is required. And the females suffer more if they lose sight with diabetic retinopathy. So it affects at all levels, the psychological level, the physical level, the social level, and loss of independence. Unfortunately, these patients who are losing sight will also have associated problems like stroke, angina, nephropathy, amputation. So I think they require basically a very combined approach with all faculties working together. And the problem now we are facing is gigantic, but by the time we reach 2045, there's going to be about a 50% global increase of this problem. And as you can see, the most of the increase, which could be almost 75%, is in the Southeast Asia, where India becomes a part of that. So this is a burgeoning problem which will keep on increasing, And as we are aware that diabetic retinopathy may develop even before the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, which is the highest percentage of patients. And all types of diabetics have these various stages, especially the vision threatening diabetic retinopathy is almost 10% of the population having diabetes. So briefly, as we are aware that this whole process is, driven by hyperglycemia, leading to retinal ischemia, which leads to VEGF production. So VEGF is the main driver. So today, as the doctor was saying, that if one tool we have to invest in today as a GO, I think the OCT is an indispensable machine, especially which will also help you in your premium IOLs and also pick up various macular pathologies, which can be treated before cataract surgery. So we have basic 2 divisions, non-proliferative and proliferative. 50% of the patients with very severe non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy will progress to PDR within 1 year. And complications associated with PDR lead to irreversible vision loss and a lot of headache for us vitreoretinal surgeons. So basic pathology is a microangiopathy with microvascular occlusion. This is how it looks in histopathology. And these are the various photographs which are showing you the various stages of microaneurysm formation as was shown here. The healthy retina versus the diabetic retina. So you have 3 things here. You have the exudates, which can be soft exudates and hard exudates. Look at the optic disc for neovascularization or pallor. The various hemorrhages which are arising from the blood vessels. So this is the early changes which you can see. So NPDR is about 4 types and PDR is early PDR and high risk PDR. So how do you detect? I think the simplest way to do is direct ophthalmoscopy, which all GOs have in their outpatient department. If they could do an indirect, that would be ideal. I think the first diagnostic thing which a patient with early diabetes will present is with microaneurysms and hard exudates, as was described. And at this stage, the treatment I would like to highlight with every slide is in this patient, if he comes to my OPD, I'll be requesting him for a tight diabetic control first and foremost. He might be having a dyslipidemia, seeing the amount of hard exudates which is there. And then I would do a OCT and decide whether to give injections if there's a center involving macular edema, as I'll show you in my further cases as we go ahead. The angiography will guide me whether it's an ischemic or a non-ischemic, but it's not very necessary. Here again, as you can see that this patient has got, coalescent hard exudates very close to the fovea. So this patient, I would do injections along with focal laser and systemic treatment of his dyslipidemia. Now, this patient progresses to a proliferative stage. So if this patient comes to my OPD with new vessels elsewhere and also macular edema associated here with extensive, cotton wool spots which shows ischemia, I would do a combination therapy of, intravitreal anti-VEGF injections with pan-retinal photocoagulation. This is a very severe patient with an extensive diabetic retinopathy change. In his, the first investigation I will offer him is to do his renal profile, because such a severe extensive hemorrhages with so many hard cotton wool spots is a suggestion of nephropathy related retinopathy. So he might be going into a end stage renal disease or an increased creatinine levels. Now, if this patient presents to my OPD, as was shown in the previous slides, that this shows a patient with PDR with pre-retinal hemorrhages. So again, as per the today's protocol S, we would be doing anti-VEGF injections, which could be either Avastin or ranibizumab, that is bevacizumab or ranibizumab, followed by a tight pan-retinal photocoagulation of 3 sittings, which can be done very rapidly, along with multiple anti-VEGF injections if necessary, to avoid a surgery in this patient. This again patient, as you can see, he's a patient, I would say, of severe NPDR with macular edema, and he would require also anti-VEGF injections with macular, maybe grid laser here, because it's a diffuse diabetic macular edema, and also a mild scatter. Similarly, this patient has a lot of cotton wool spots, so I'll rule out hypertension in him and renal disease, and after doing an OCT, decide whether he requires injection versus observation. This is again showing a very severely ischemic and ocular ischemic syndrome with the extensive cotton wool spots. So you could do a color Doppler to see whether there's ocular ischemia in this patient and rule out internal carotid artery occlusion. Now, the battle of DME, I usually divide it because DME is a multifactorial disease. VEGF is the prime driver, but there are various other, cytokines, like we are aware of, COVID-related cytokine storm. So I feel that, diabetic macular edema and diabetic retinopathy is more like a COVID cytokine storm, which is affecting the eye locally. So you would require an anti-VEGF agent, which is Batman, and you would also require Avengers fighting, a group of people who are fighting the various cytokines which are there. And that's where steroid comes in our armamentarium. And for a general ophthalmologist, I think to use intravitreal Kenacort along with the supervision of a retinal surgeon is a very good tool in our armamentarium, which is cheap, which we can suggest to our patients. So in macular edema, you can always expect the unexpected, and you'll have the rebel patients who don't follow up with you, in your OPD. So what will you do for these patients? So most patients, do have resistance to anti-VEGF drugs, and so you have to look at other modalities, which include Ozurdex and intravitreal steroids. So I'll just share with you all some cases which I had, which we treated. So this is a case of a treatment-naive DME, a 75-year-old male, 30 years, uncontrolled diabetic, received some laser, some injections, and this is how he came to us, So this is how he presented to us with severe macular edema, and he had been lasered priorly. And we gave him an injection of Ozurdex, and this is the beautiful response we had. So as Dr. Khatri was saying, I think the one gadget to invest in is an OCT, and look at the dramatic response we got with a single injection. But then, as you know, this disease is recalcitrant. It does come back, but it every time does respond to intravitreal injections. He did have also a vitreomacular traction, as you can see here. but then we didn't operate him because he responded beautifully to injections every time. This is another gentleman who was again a 30-year-old diabetic who was being treated with multiple Avastins and laser PRP. And this is how he looked when he presented to me. So you can see there's an extensive laser being done here in this photograph here. There's a central foveal edema here. And this is the other eye also, which was receiving a lot of injections of Avastin. But you can see the cyst which has formed here. It's a resistance cyst, which didn't respond to anti-VEGF injections. And this is the dramatic response we got with a single injection of intravitreal steroids of Ozurdex. You can see that there's been adequate laser done here, actually over laser here. And this is the foveal contour coming back with his vision recovering to 612. Similarly, for the other eye also, as you can see, it did respond very well to intravitreal injections. We move to this next case, which we see, post-cataract macular edema is very common in diabetic patients, So again, a general ophthalmologist who's doing cataract primarily will face this situation where his patients are not doing well post-surgically after an excellent cataract surgery, and then OCT will be very helpful. And this is the left eye and the right eye. And this is the excellent response with a single injection of Ozurdex, which we added also macular focal laser to prevent recurrence. But it does recur in these patients, as we are all very aware. Look at this CME with CSME with intraretinal cystoid spaces. But it does respond very well to intravitreal injections and laser, as is shown here. And the foveal contour can come back to absolutely normal in these eyes, But these do tend to recur, as you saw, over time, So you require to babysit these eyes, but unlike AMD, where the treatment is, lifetime, in diabetic retinopathy patients, I've seen that the disease, if you babysit it well enough for 2 to 3 years, the disease does die down with an excellent systemic control if the patient understands the importance. Now, this patient I will share with you all, both eyes DME, who had received multiple injections. So this is his eye. So over time, we have been seeing him 2016, again later. Again, you can see the macular edema coming back. So he was treated, he was very skeptical of more injections. So we've been following up conservatively with NSAID drops and steroid drops. So you can see that when his systemic control is good, the macular edema does respond even to, systemic control, mild focal laser, and you don't necessarily need to give injections. So this is showing you a history of a patient who refused injections over the last 4 years. I have his serial OCTs. This is 2018. And this is a very recent one. You can see here. Last few cases, if you have the time, I'll share with you. This was a teacher who was presented in 2011. So I want to show you a very, 10-year follow-up which we have of these patients who presented like this, was treated with multiple anti-VEGF injections and laser. This is the right eye. And this is how she responded 2011. She gets better. Left eye has similar sort of edema, which responds. The right eye in 2012 almost becomes flat like that. This is in 2021, the right eye and the left eye. So this disease has actually, gone back into remission, and she received multiple injections, and last few injections she received was of Ozurdex, which gave us this beautiful anatomical repositioning of her retina here. This was the last patient I'll share with you all who had a very recalcitrant cyst, as you can see here in this left eye, a macular cyst, which didn't respond very beautifully to Avastins initially, but it used to keep coming back with Avastin. This is how it used to come back, And then again, he responded so beautifully. You can see that the absolute foveal contour has come back beautifully with steroid switch. So you need to, juggle between both the drugs and add laser as and when needed. And this is still his last follow-up. You can see that he's, staying very flat. I'll end with my last case, which we had treated of a giant macular edema, as you can see here. And with a single injection, he responded beautifully and he has remained flat so far. So thank you very much for your kind indulgence. And I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Dr. Dudani, I think your presentation was very nice. And
Thanks.
I am also a very great supporter of steroid, and you are so well correlated with your cytokine storm experience with this COVID thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
We are still, I think, having 10 minutes for our last speaker, and once he
Sure,
finishes up, we may have a couple of minutes for discussion, and you can have some comments. Abhishek, Dr. Abhishek, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are
Lights
audible.
are visible. Okay, thank you, sir. So, thank you, Malay sir, and AIOS for giving me this opportunity. Just wait for 1 minute. Yeah. So, my slides are visible?
Yes.
So, okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Is it visible or not?
Not yet.
Yeah. Now?
yeah. Open your PPT, doctor. Open your PPT on the desktop. Then you share
Yeah.
it. Open
Yeah,
it.
I've shared. I've shared. Is it visible? No.
No. Open your PPT.
Okay, just wait.
Open it on the desktop and then you can share it.
Now?
Yes.
Yes,
Perfect, doctor. Perfect.
Okay. So, thanks to Malay sir and AIOS for giving me this opportunity. A lot of things have already been discussed here. As we know that the diabetic retinopathy and its complications, they can cause the irreversible vision loss, especially in our working age adults. And in this pandemic, in the last lockdown, after lockdown, we have seen so many patients of diabetic retinopathy presenting to us with the advanced diabetic eye disease. Studies have showed that despite all medical management, including laser, anti-VEGF injections, and the good control of sugar and lipid, nearly 5% of these diabetic retinopathy patients, they show continuous progression to retinopathy, and they ultimately require surgical intervention. So a lot of our colleagues, they ask that we are referring a patient to you, and the patient has diabetic TRD. So पेशेंट को आपके पास भेज रहे हैं, देख लीजिएगा कुछ विजन का होगा कि नहीं होगा, kind of. Lot of that kind of questions come to us as a VR surgeon. We face these questions. So this purpose of this slide is to update the general ophthalmologists that now we are at far better situation than the previous time. We have got better machines. We have got 23 gauge MIVS microincision vitreoretinal surgeries. They are very fast, sutureless, and the visual recovery and the anatomical recovery restoration is very quick in these with these machines. So we have 23 gauge, 25 gauge, 27 gauge vitrectomy cutters. We have improved fluidics, and we have very good machines in which we can intraoperatively control the intraocular pressure to achieve a hemostasis. And the cut rate is so high, like 7,000 and 10,000 cut rate, that we can work just over the retina, just like we are just slicing the butter, and it doesn't even create a small traction. So it's quite safe working over the retina and cutting these epiretinal membranes with this cutter. We have got a very good viewing system in which we can see up to the aura, almost 160 degree up to the retina. We can see by just tilting the globe with the help of the endolight and these cutters. Endo illumination is so good now that we have wide angle endo illumination probes. We have chandelier lights, so we can manually dissect these epiretinal membranes and retinal membranes. And our laser probes are also wide angle, so cryo is almost obsolete in these patients for surgery. We can do laser almost up to the aura without indentation of the globe. So the things have changed a lot now, and we are dealing with more complex cases. Definitely these cases are challenging, and we are not giving 6x6 or 6x9 to these patients, but we are in far better situation with these things. Thanks to science and technology, we are at least making these patients living independently and earning themselves. So this is the advancement in our surgery, and the basic principle for this diabetic vitrectomy, there are basically 5 principles. First, we have to clear the media opacity. Either whether it is a cataract, then you have to remove the cataract and then proceed for the vitrectomy. If there is a vitreous hemorrhage, then you have to clear the vitreous hemorrhage and do the rest of the things. So first is the clear the media opacity. The second is the releasing all the traction, whether it is anterior posterior traction or tangential traction. So you have to remove all the traction which are there over the retina, or which are from the posterior hilar to retina. We have to cut all these tractions. Then achieve hemostasis. This is very important in diabetic retinopathy surgery, that we have to achieve a proper hemostasis intra-op, because the most common complication after diabetic vitrectomy is the post-op day 1 posterior segment hypema. So we have to achieve the hemostasis with the help of endocautery or photocoagulation, or with the help of intraocular pressure, automated intraocular pressure control. And after the fourth principle is do the laser photocoagulation up to the ora, up to the rest of the retina. And the tamponade, last tamponade, if it is required, if there is some break, you see any retinal break, then we use either gas or oil tamponade. So coming to the indications for vitrectomy, as Dr. Manish showed us, that non-clearing vitreous hemorrhage is the most common indication in diabetic patients. Previously, we used to wait for 3 months. So the main question with the diabetic vitreous hemorrhage is when to intervene in these patients. So it depends upon a lot of things. Previously, study showed that we have to wait for at least 3 months, but it's obsolete now. DRVS, diabetic retinopathy vitrectomy study shows that there's no point unnecessary waiting for the 3 months long period. So now, preferably, the dictum is we wait for 1 month in type 1 diabetic patients and we wait for 2 months in type 2 diabetic patients. Because if you keep on waiting for these patients, generally the vitreous in the vitreous hemorrhage patients, the posterior hilars acts as a scaffold for the development of fibrovascular membrane, and ultimately they causes the TRD, and visual prognosis becomes poor. So with the help of the newer machines and better intra and pharmacological agents, we are in a better situation, and we can intervene early in these patients to give a good visual recovery. Some other factors which may affect your decision is improvement in vision. If the patient vision is gradually improving, so you can wait for a surgery. If the previously the eye was lasered, this is also a good sign, because lasered eye is in a better situation rather than a nav eye. So you can wait for this time. Other eye status, like if the patient is one-eyed and having vitreous hemorrhage, then definitely you have to be little aggressive in your approach. And the systemic condition of the patient, this is very important. If patient is highly and systemically not stable, sugar is very high, or the renal profile is not controlled, and all these things, then you have to wait until the things are controlled. Another indication is tractional retinal detachment. This is second most common complications of advanced diabetic eye disease, which we see. TRD, like in this picture, you can say that there is a laser marks here, and there is a tabletop TRD covering the whole disc and the macular area, and there is a large pre-retinal hemorrhage you can see in this area. So the TRD generally starts over the arcade, and they progress very slowly towards the fovea. So sometimes if the patient vision is good and the TRD is in the arcade area or in the nasal part of the retina, and it is not affecting the vision, there is no vitreous hemorrhage, and the TRD is localized, you can wait, and there is no need to intervene in this patient. And you can wait, follow up these patients, or you can just do a 360-degree laser around the TRD, one disc away from the TRD, so that the TRD is a little bit localized. It's not going to progress. So TRD threatening to fovea or TRD involving the fovea is an indication where when you have to act immediately. There is no point waiting at this decision, because macular heterotropia for long standing duration, the visual prognosis is bad then. This is a picture. It's not my picture. This is Dr. Vishali Gupta picture. This is a pre-op patient. You can see here 20 by 200 vision. Here you can see the TRD involving the disc and the macula. And here you can see after the 23 gauge vitrectomy with no tamponade and only endolaser and air fluid exchange, you can see the 2 months after the vision is 20 by 40. Combined retinal detachment is when the TRD progresses, the fibrovascular component, as the progression of fibrovascular component happens, there is a more fibrous component than the vascular component, and these fibrous component can create a break at the base of these TRDs. So these breaks are very small, and sometimes you can miss in the clinical examination. But when your TRD progresses very fastly, then this is an indication there might be a break underneath that membrane. So the RP is exposed, and the fibrovascular membranes are proliferating very fast. So TRD, CRD is another indication when you need early intervention, and most of the time they need tamponade also. Premacular hemorrhage is there's a lot of things to treat the premacular hemorrhage. We are treating premacular hemorrhage with intravitreal TPA also, along with the anti-VEGF and along with the gas tamponade. But here the main thing is that we cannot keep the large amount of hemorrhage over the macula for more than 2 weeks, because the hemosiderin is going to damage your photoreceptors in the macular area. And ultimately, if after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, even if you are do something, it's not, you are not going to get too much. So it is premacular hemorrhage where the large amount of blood is there over the macula. You have to act early and aggressively. So, and it's coming to vitreomacular interface abnormality in diabetic macular edema, which is not responding to anti-VEGF, maybe because of the vitreomacular traction. Then you have to relieve this traction. There's no point keep on injecting. You have to relieve the traction, then only you can get the benefit. The ERM, where or the sometimes taut posterior ILM. In these cases, you have to remove the ERM along with the ILM peeling for the in these diabetic patients. This is one case where pre-op you can see macular pucker over the retina, and this is post-op. You can see the retina is very well flat after 3 months of, this is 3-month post-op picture. And the last indication is neovascular glaucoma with host cell glaucoma presenting with acute vitreous hemorrhage. These are the cases where you can manage these patients with anti-VEGF, along with anti-VEGF and vitrectomy. So the PPV is a key role in the treatment of severe and proliferative these advanced diabetic cases. And with the advent of this MIVS and plenty of pharmacological anti-VEGF agents, the early vitrectomy is definitely favored, and it gives a better visual outcome and a faster recovery. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Abhishek. And before we finish up our IC, there's a question for Dr. Ajay Dudhani from Dr. Mehboob from Bangladesh. And he is asking whether in all recalcitrant macular edemas of diabetic maculopathy, would he advise a steroid injection? Dr. Ajay?
Yeah. So what I feel is that, especially even now, even treatment naive also, I am moving more towards intravitreal Ozurdex along with steroids, which is a steroid, along with laser treatment, because I feel you require much more repeat injections of anti-VEGF vis-a-vis a single injection of Ozurdex does last for 4 months, And if you can top it up with laser, that acts as an anti-VEGF agent itself, your laser scatter photocoagulation. So I do feel that, you could start with anti-VEGF and then switch to Ozurdex. That's a very good option for this recalcitrant.
Yeah, I think we lost the last part of the statement. But anyway, the message is clear that more and more we are shifting in cases of diabetic macular edema towards steroid. Earlier, we were quite hesitant in using it. What do you say?
True. Yes, I agree with you, because the incidence of glaucoma, which we are worried about, is very less. It's hardly about 20 to 30% patients develop glaucoma with Ozurdex. And that also is very medically manageable because it's in, 20s, 25s, it doesn't go very high.
Yes. And the disease is more extensive, and I think anti-VEGFs are not able to handle it.
And the another thing of steroids is that we don't have to poke the patient like every month. Okay.
Very true.
So,
very true.
Because in this time it's very difficult for follow-up also, patients coming like every month for OCT and injection, So trends is changing, I think, and Ozurdex is definitely very safe. IOP spike is very less and more, but we have to explain the patient down the line 1 or 2 years they might need cataract surgery. That's all.
So, if there is any other final comment before we finish up?
And my question to Ajay sir is that what is your opinion about the flat NVD? How do you deal with the flat NVD while in like cases of CRVO or diabetic vitrectomy? We see that after vitreous hemorrhage, we remove that everything, and then we see the flat NVD is here, which is oozing. And next post-op, they will see there is a lot of, like pre-retinal heme is there, and we cannot laser that thing, and we try everything, but most of the times it oozes. Very little ooze is there and becomes very massive next post-op day.
Yes. So I totally agree with you. Like normally in these patients, what I try to do is reduce the bottle height once you have finished your vitrectomy to see whether the new vessels are oozing or no, because if your bottle height is high, you don't know whether you're actually tamponading it due to the bottle height. So you reduce the bottle height and try to do a little bit of, direct diathermy. If it's not on the disc, if it's NVE, then you can directly diathermize the new vessels which are leaking, And I usually, if the PDR is very bad, I would rather put silicone oil, in these eyes, the ones which are extensive TRD with neovascularization, because that does help in compartmentalizing the blood. Otherwise, you get a recurrent full vitreous hemorrhage.
But with the silicone oil, what I feel, what is my view, that even after filling silicone oil, sometimes we see sub oil heme is there.
Yes, very true. It's
Do
very
you think
difficult.
do you think that we can put LPFC and leave it for 7 days and then we can again re-inject, or maybe we don't need any tamponade after 7 days when we remove the LPFC?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I have never used it, doctor. I have never used it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very conservative. Yeah.
So any last comments from Dr. Mohit or maybe Dr. Vijat or Dr. Manish? Yeah, I think if not there, then we had a fantastic session.
Yeah.
Last 90 minutes were... Manish, any comments?
No, sir, not at all.
No, good job, Malay. Keep it up.
Yeah, so 90 minutes went off like that. They just flew away, yeah? It was fantastic, minute to minute. And our consultants, participants, panelists were fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. So look forward to develop upon this concept, and we'll be staying in touch. Thank you all for being there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.